My Tacoma broke down. Now what? Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Robmotive. And that's right, what happens if your Tacoma breaks down? Now what? What are you gonna do? Let's say that you're on a trip somewhere, you're driving along, and something happens. You know, there's a few things that you should have with you and a few things that you should check out just to make sure that you're prepared, because after all, it only matters if it really happens. So, a few things. Number one, a portable tire compressor or a portable air compressor. You know, something to fill up the tires should you have a leak. You know, not every flat tire has to be catastrophic, right? You could have a slow leak, maybe a nail or something that's stuck in there that's letting a little bit of air out. And by the way, if that happens, don't rip the whole thing out unless you have some kind of repair kit with you and an air compressor. But let's say you go somewhere, you stay overnight in a hotel, it's out in the middle of nowhere, you get up the next day and you've got a flat tire or a very low tire. You just whip out your portable air compressor, fill it up, and then get to somewhere to get it fixed. And that's the key. I wouldn't just keep doing this because after all, the leak could get worse and maybe you're not gonna be able to fill it up or it blows completely. Number two, check your spare tire. In the first scenario, you might wanna go ahead and change the tire out. I mean, that's what I would do. But if there's no air in your spare tire, it's not gonna do you much good. And this is something that I think a lot of people ignore and don't do. Because after all, how often do you get a flat tire and are you really gonna need it? It's one of those things that are only important if it actually happens. But believe me, if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you do have a catastrophic failure, it would be nice to be able to change your own tire, right? Not to have to call one of those services and wait 3, 4, 6, 10 hours if they show up at all, because you are out in the middle of nowhere. Number three, a flashlight. Always important to have a flashlight because things don't always happen during the day. Again, I'll use the scenario. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's pitch black, you get a flat tire, it's kind of nice to be able to see what you're doing. And by the way, I know there's a flashlight on your camera or on your phone rather, but do you really want to run down your phone, something that enables you to get a hold of somebody if there is an emergency, just because you don't have a flashlight in your Tacoma? No, check the batteries too. You know, I think, and I'm guilty of this, I have a flashlight in my Toyota Tacoma in case I do break down or something, but I don't check the batteries often enough. Flashlight's not gonna be very good if the batteries are dead, right? Next up, some flares or those reflecting triangles. You know, something to put behind your truck if you're out somewhere so that other people can see you. You know, the worst thing that could happen would be if you're pulled off the side of the road and somebody doesn't see you, right? Especially if it's nighttime or maybe it's bad weather, maybe it's foggy, maybe it's pouring down rain, snow, all the things that, of course, are going on when something bad happens. Nothing ever happens on a perfectly sunny day when you're prepared for it, right? Next up, a jack or jack extensions. This is important if you have a lifted truck or if you have bigger tires, depending on the lift, of course. You have to be able to reach the points to jack underneath the truck. Now, this is something that I didn't think about first off, the first time I lifted a truck until later on. Then I whipped out the jack, stuck it under there and saw that the jack was almost, if not fully extended. You know, those jacks that come with the Tacoma are horrible anyway. I'm always leery, even when I'm doing a test on them in my garage in ideal situations, that they're not gonna hold very well. Imagine being off the side of the road in gravel on something that's uneven and trying to use one of those jacks, particularly if you're lifted. You know, it's probably well worth it to get something a little bit more substantial and to make sure that your jack is gonna reach if you're lifted. You may need some kind of a spacer or block. And it can be as simple as wood. You know, I did a video a little while back where I actually made my own spacer because my truck at the time was lifted fairly high. And I wanted to make sure that I had the ability to lift it up. Now, some of you are going to say, well, yeah, if the frame's not affected. Well, what about bigger, taller tires? If you go with tires that are taller, that's going to raise those jack points up as well. Always good to have some kind of a block or something under there, even if it's just to kind of level things out and give you a little bit more sturdy base. Next up, of course, tools. Now, this is kind of difficult to narrow down exactly what you need because, of course, if something happens, you're not going to know that up front. Otherwise, you could have planned for it and fixed it before it ever did, right? But there's a few rudimentary things that I would suggest and things that I carry in my own Toyota Tacoma. A knife, in case you need to cut something. Who knows what it could be? A screwdriver or screwdrivers, flathead and Phillips. You need both because you never know what kind of screw you might run into. Who knows what could happen? Pliers. Pliers are always good to have. They serve a lot of functions. You can beat on things with them, squeeze things with them. One thing that I noticed, it can be kind of difficult to remove the spare tire from its carrier on your truck. Doesn't hurt to have a spare set of hands in the form of pliers, if you will, to kind of grab onto things. A hammer. Back to the spare tire. Have you ever had one of those freeze, rust up on you? You might need to get under there and tap things a little bit to loosen them up. Always good to have. You never know when you might need it. And lastly, a set of gloves. You're going to depend on your hands to fix whatever's wrong, and it might be cold outside. Good idea to have a decent pair of work gloves in your truck in case you need to do something that can be a bit stressful on the hands. Lastly, a first aid kit. Now, I'm not talking about something where you can perform surgery, right? I know a lot of people get on and they say they've got all these things and different tourniquets and bandages and all. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. Because I think if you get into a situation where you need that kind of stuff, you better get help from somebody who really knows what they're doing. I'm talking about the simple things. Maybe some gauze, some Band-Aids, of course. Always a good idea to have some Band-Aids. When you're out there messing around with things, if you're like me, you're probably going to cut yourself doing something. And if you're not quite finished with the job, now you've got to deal with that as opposed to just wrapping a Band-Aid around it and getting on with what you need to do. Of course, you can go more extreme. There are tourniquets and all kinds of things out there that you can include. Antiseptic spray of some kind or some kind of antiseptic is a good idea. Last thing you want to do is lose a finger because you got a cut while you were changing your spare tire or changing your tire and it got infected. Something just to clean it off a little bit. That's pretty much it. Anyway, those are just a few things that I would want if my Tacoma broke down. I don't want to be sitting there going, now what? Leave a comment. Let me know. What kind of stuff do you carry? What am I missing that's really important? I'd be curious. Also, real quick, I do have 2 additional channels. Robmotive, JT, all about Jeep Gladiators, and Robmotive MT, all about compact trucks. Check them out, and if you're interested, why not subscribe? Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.